Hi again guys, and welcome to another installment of Beards and Cars, the more informal series for those who are maybe new here, where we talk about stuff which isn't necessarily needed in a video in the week. It's not a cartoon or a review for Forza or Gran Turismo. It could be talking about something else entirely. And for this particular pick, I was planning to make this episode a little bit shorter. We'll see how that pans out, but I basically wanted to ask you guys kind of a continuation, if you will, of a subject which we discussed recently, and that is stuff that you'd like to see on the channel. Now, we've already covered the main bulk of the channel. Forza stuff, Gran Turismo stuff, how it's going to change in the future, whether or not you still want to see GT6 videos, and all that kind of stuff. You weighed in on that. I was surprised how many people were still positive for the Gran Turismo 6 stuff. That's cool, so we will continue doing that. Eventually it will be phased out, and ultimately it could end up being a little bit like Gran Turismo 2, 3, 4 and 5, in as much as we do throwback videos to it, but it doesn't necessarily dominate the channel. Whereas, obviously, for the past 3 or 4 years, it has been the main bulk of the channel. But as Gran Turismo Sport comes into play, obviously, it will be a couple of months, probably, before I start even phasing out Gran Turismo 6 videos, even after GT Sport's release. That's the way it currently is, anyway. I'm also, as I said, planning to do Forza 7 content, as well as Horizon 3 content. And again, with the Forza franchise, the older games like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they'll be more, again, like throwback videos, featuring some of the cars that aren't on newer games in reviews, sometimes tunes, but not necessarily as much. That kind of thing. This video, though, is for something a little bit different to that, because occasionally, as some of you guys know, I put out full playthroughs of certain games. Sometimes it will be the whole game in one video. Of course, I did the entire game, or the entire story mode, of Driver San Francisco, one of my favourite driving games, in one video. It's like a 2.5 hour video where we just played through the whole thing with all of the cutscenes. Other times I'll do like a 4 or 5 part big bulk playthrough, like with Dead Rising 3, which is another one of my favourite games. We did the whole game in 5 episodes, they're like an hour long each, and that's the complete main story mode, again with all the cutscenes. And in the past, we've done some others too. One of the longer ones which I did, which incidentally still isn't finished, was my playthrough of The Thing, which, as I've said before, is my favourite movie of all time, so of course I wanted to play the game. That was back on the Elgato, so quite a while ago. Never finished that one though. We did about 31 episodes, but that was my first ever playthrough of a non-racing game. So my commentary was very clunky, my gameplay wasn't really polished at all, because things that I learned from doing that, and of course I'm not a playthrough style gamer anyway, so I'm not expecting to go into it and be like PewDiePie or Markiplier or Tobuscus, because I just don't do that kind of gaming. But some of the things that I did learn from that were, for instance, don't try and be comedic, because that's not what I do. And when I try to be funny, I'm not really. It kind of just comes, or it doesn't. So don't try to do it. And also that I need to know, not necessarily the whole game, but I need to know at least how the fundamental physics work, like the controls, etc., to get into the game, and to have a playthrough that looks like it has a nice flow to it. So you're not spending like the first 2 or 3 episodes just clunking around trying to figure out how the game works, which is kind of what that series ended up like. Whereas with my playthrough of Driver San Fran, that was like the 3rd time I played through the game. So, you know what you're doing by that point, and you can do it quickly. And also with Dead Rising 3, that was like the 4th or 5th time I played through it. So basically what I wanted to ask you guys, because I know some of you have mentioned this before, and these videos actually kind of act as this to some degree, because I feature a different game each week. This one, for instance, is Resistance 2, which incidentally was suggested to me. So thank you for that suggestion. That was based on another playthrough that I did for the Black Site game. I really enjoyed the Black Site game. I was planning to do a 5-part playthrough of that one. Never got to the 5th part, because unfortunately when I had to swap laptops, I lost that final episode. So we may return to that in the future, but for now it doesn't look like we're going to. It wasn't a hugely popular series anyway, but for stuff like Resistance, which is this game, that was suggested to me based on that, based on the fact that I like Black Site. And it is similar. I would personally say that Resistance is a better game, or a better franchise, than Black Site is, and I enjoy it very much. I'm on the third game currently. I completed the first and second. Yeah, it's cool. I really enjoy it, so thanks for that suggestion. As far as other games, though, this is really the bulk of what I want your guys' opinion on. Now, I have certain games, you know this from older videos, that I buy, and I just don't really play. Some of them I deliberately don't play to hold them back for possible YouTube playthroughs, and some of them I just don't get around to anyway because I've bought them to collect rather than to specifically play. And that tends to be more on the racing side of things, with like niched formula games and touring car games and kart racing, stuff which I don't really care for, but I just buy it to have as many racing games as possible, like obscure ones as well. But I know, as I said, some of you have mentioned that you would like to see me do some playthroughs of certain games, newer ones or older ones. So this is what I'd like to hear from you about. What kind of games, and it's more so non-driving games, but it could include driving games if you want to, as long as it has enough of a story to it to have a decent playthrough of, that you would like to see on the channel. And also the structure that you would like to see, because what I've done in the past has varied. For The Thing, or at least the portion of the game that we did, I believe if I remember correctly I released a portion of that each day or every other day. Whereas for other games, like obviously with Driver, it was one video, so that's one and done. Whereas with others like Black Site, I believe I released a portion of that each day, and with other games I might just release a ton of them at once. Like I remember I did a full playthrough for Batman Arkham City. I'm a huge fan of the Arkham games. Overall, it's my favourite game franchise ever. And I released a full playthrough of that. And I think, if I remember correctly, I released all of the episodes at once. So, obviously, that means that people aren't necessarily going to tune in to watch each episode. They've just got all of the episodes so they can binge it if they want to. But if they're not interested, they don't have to keep seeing it pop up in their feed. So, there are drawbacks to both ways of doing it. If you release an episode each week, then it gives a nice schedule, but for those who aren't interested, it could be annoying to see it popping up all the time when you don't want to see it, potentially. That won't annoy most people, but potentially. The other way is to release it all at once, which means that if you don't want to see it, you'll never see it again, because they were all released in one go, but it means that basically, unless you specifically set aside the time to watch them all, there's a strong chance of it just getting lost in the fray, and never watching it, maybe just watching the first episode. So, as I said, I would also like to hear from you guys which way you would like it done. If there is a certain game that you would like to see me do a playthrough of, would you like it with or without commentary? Would you like it released all at once, or would you like it done as a daily thing? Would you like it done as a weekly thing? Would you like it done as like an every other day kind of thing? So basically the kind of structure that you would personally like to see, if you would like to see that. Or if you don't want playthroughs, if you're not interested, not as much, because obviously that's kind of neither way, you don't feel good or bad. Whereas if you specifically don't like the idea of it, then by all means put that down below. If you don't care, you could put that, but that's not really important, it's neither here nor there. And if you're positive for it, obviously I'd love to hear that. But as far as specific games, as I said, I'm thinking more slightly outside of what we usually do, because most racing games don't really require Let's Plays, because they don't have a narrative, they don't have a storyline, they're just about burning through races, collecting cars, and completing everything. And although some people might be interested in watching that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think most of you guys would really have that much interest in watching me slog through every single game in like Gran Turismo 5, for instance, with full-on 24-hour races. I don't think I could even do that because it would take so long to upload, but if you did want to see something like that, by all means, put it down below. But I did have a few games in mind that I would be interested in doing playthroughs for. A couple of them I have played through before, but the ones that I have played through, I think you guys may like to see again. So here are a couple of the ideas, and I'll also list them on screen. The first one is this game, Resistance. And the advantage of Resistance is that there are currently 3 games. So if you guys would like to see me play through that, for instance, you could play through the first, then the second, then the third. Then there's also a game which I know a couple of you would like to see, as soon as I mentioned that I bought it, because in certain countries it is banned, and that's Manhunt. So if you'd like to see that, of course, comment down below. I believe there's only... Actually, is there one Manhunt game, or is there more? I'm not sure. I think there might be more, actually. I can't remember. I own the first one. If there are more, I don't own that one. But that's another option, of course. A little bit more niched, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Then there's the Dead Space franchise. I own, I think, 3 Dead Space games. I think there are only 3. But again, it's not a newer game, so whether or not people would want to see that, that's down to you down below. There's a game that I bought called Cold Fear, which is, for those who are familiar with The Thing, it's basically like a Parasite-based monster game, but with Cold Fear, it's based on, I think it's a fishing boat or a rescue boat. Apparently the storyline isn't that long. What they mean by that, I don't know. Does that mean it's like an hour or what? But who knows? And of course, a series doesn't necessarily need to be long, so that's, again, not really a bad thing. Long is good, but a shorter series can work as well. So that's another option. Another option again is to finish my playthrough of The Thing, or maybe even start it again and do it better. That's another option. I wouldn't mind doing that. I haven't completed the game still, so again, if you guys would be interested in seeing that, that is another legitimate option. Another one is the Suffering franchise. I say franchise, I think there are at least 2, The Suffering and The Suffering Ties That Bind. I think there are at least there are at least 2, I'm not sure if there's 3 though. So again, if you'd be interested in seeing that. Then there's The Punisher. I showed a bit of Punisher footage before, it's from the PS2. I showed it in one of these videos as the background video. Again, that's another option. I like that game. It's not overly long. You can do basically a couple of missions, usually per episode, or 1 mission, but there's only like 12 or 13 missions in the game anyway. That game doesn't lend itself as much toward comedy, that's for sure. But then again, stuff like Manhunt doesn't necessarily, but there's a certain point where a game can get so violent that it kind of becomes silly, and I think Manhunt or The Suffering or Prototype, they're more on that side of things, whereas The Punisher is a little bit more mean-spirited than that. But still, it's an option, and I do love that game. Then you've got Predator, Concrete Jungle. I'm a huge Predator fan. It's quite a notorious game. A lot of people don't like the way the controls are. I had a quick play of the game. I played the tutorial levels. There are 3 separate tutorials, if I remember correctly, for the controls. So yeah, it's fairly complex, but to be honest, it's not really any more complex than the Arkham games. You use all of the buttons in the Arkham games, and once you get a hang of it, you can dominate that game. So again, if you'd like to see a playthrough of Predator, which I haven't played through, and I would be interested to do that. Of course, it's a PS2 game again, so the graphics aren't amazing, but there you go. Then we've got Half-Life. I have never played the Half-Life games. I know a lot of people love Half-Life. It's kind of an ongoing meme or joke on the internet that there is no Half-Life 3. I believe I own both of them. I haven't played either of them. Then there's ICO, ICO, the predecessor to Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus is my favourite game that I've never played. I watched PewDiePie do the full playthrough of it. Loved that game, and I cannot wait for the remastered version to come out on the PS4. I can't remember what the date on that one is, but I'm definitely buying that. And that actually brings me to another side point. It doesn't necessarily need to be games that are older or that have just come out. If there are games that haven't been released yet that you guys would like to see me play, then by all means put that down below, because if you do ask for those, that is kind of an advantage for me, because obviously playing a game that's just been released is always going to get more fanfare and more views than an older one. So from my point of view as a business, that's a good idea, but it depends whether you would want to see it. I would definitely be up to play through Shadow of the Colossus, because although I love it, I've never played it. So we could do that, do like one Colossi in every video. And incidentally, if that is something you guys would like to see, you could also, or we could also play Eco or Ico first, because I believe it's supposed to be the prequel to that game. I'm not sure. As I said, I haven't played it, but we could play that one on the PS2, then play Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4 when it's released, and then maybe go back and play the third one, The Last Guardian. But who knows? Again, it's down to what you'd like to see. The next option is Extermination. That's another super rare, super obscure game, similar to Cold Fear and The Thing. It's based around like alien monster parasite kind of thing. The more time you spend near the monsters, the more you get infected over the course of the game. It's pretty obvious where the game's going to lead, if that's the way the story works, but still, it could be interesting. It's a more obscure game, a bit like Manhunt, that kind of thing. Then I've got something totally different, The Godfather. The Godfather Part 1 I've got on the PS2, Godfather Part 2 on the Xbox 360. So again, totally different kind of game, much more narrative driven, much more reality based compared to something like Monsters. It's another option. Then I already mentioned Resistance. There's another one which I do love. I have played through it before. I planned to do a playthrough for it, but I never actually got around to it, and that's Alice, Madness Returns. One of my favourite games, and in real life, apart from games, the imagery and the art style of everything to do with Alice in Wonderland, I love. I'm a huge fan of steampunk art and steampunk clothes and gothic stuff, and that game is everything that I love visually. It's a fantastic looking game. But again, it depends if you'd like to see that. Of course, recently, I think it was last week even, if I remember correctly, we used that as the background video. So if you want to see what Alice looks like, that game, check out that video, and I also did a review for the whole game. A much condensed down video. So check that one out as well. That game doesn't take too long to play through, so if you wanted to play through that one you could. It's a little bit more of a cult classic game, so it could be interesting. And finally, something a little bit different, the only driving one on the list, because it does kind of have a narrative, and I know a lot of you guys have a lot of love for these. But possibly, if you would like to see it, we could go back and play the original Need for Speed Underground, and then maybe Underground 2, if you'd like to see that. Because obviously those games have a very story-structured experience, especially the first one, where you play through 111 races, and that's the whole game done. And you've got the story peppered in through there with Samantha and the Civic Coupe and the mechanic who steals the car or wins it in whatever pink slip race and spray paints it, and racing against Eddie and Melissa at the end. Spoiler alert! But obviously, if you'd like to go back and play that, for instance, that would be more of a story-based driving game. So again, if you'd like to see that, feel free to comment. And of course, if any of these which I've mentioned you would like to see, slap it down below. I'd love to hear about it. Or, as I mentioned earlier, if there's something which I haven't mentioned, maybe it is something I own, maybe it isn't. It could be an older game, could be a current one, could be a game that isn't even out yet. Something like Call of Duty Zombies, whichever number game that is. I know that's coming out soon. The trailer looks pretty awesome, looks like my kind of game. Generally speaking, I like scary games, I like monster games. I'm not a PC gamer though, so you need to bear that in mind. I don't do any PC gaming. So if you suggest something that's PC based, or only on the PC, probably not going to happen. So it's more console stuff. But of course, that's it overall. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts down below, not only on what games you'd like to see, and it doesn't need to be one, of course it could be more than one, and also the frequency that you'd like to see it. Would you like to see it weekly, daily, all in one go? I doubt many people would want that, but of course it is an option. And more importantly, I would say, would you like it with commentary, and potentially, I don't know how to do it currently, but potentially with a face cam down the line as well for reactions, that kind of stuff. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on all of these things, and that's it overall. So I'll see you guys next week, and as always, thanks for watching.